YouTube folks, and welcome to my channel. This is The Steph Story. My name is Stephanie Iris, and today I will be talking about some spooky fall book recommendations to end the season right. These are some are really horror-y, some are kind of like just eerie and spooky. I've got a couple thrillers, I got a couple mindless scary books, just like all those mindless scary movies that we all love, to end the season with a bang before Christmas comes and gets us all. As much as I wish I could collect every single book I've ever read, both good and bad, and store them in all my bookshelves, I don't have the finances nor the space for that lifestyle. So a lot of books I read, I rent from the library. I'm a very active user of my public library, and I also love audiobooks, which is very new. I was very anti-audiobooks for a long time, but then you move out of your parents' house and you have chores to do, and all you want to do is finish that book, and it's like, oh man, you know what I could do while I do dishes? Listen to an audiobook. And I have fallen in love with audiobooks. So some will be pictures on either side to show you the cover, or I will pull it out of my bookshelf here. So the first book I want to recommend is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I read this book really recently. I think I read it right before Halloween this year. It really took me by surprise. Grady Hendrix is pretty controversial. I know he has some big haters and some big lovers. I also really enjoyed his book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying, or whatever it's called, something like that. But How to Sell a Haunted House I enjoyed much more. It's about these two siblings, and their parents recently passed, and they have to figure out the whole beneficiary situation, and they fight over who gets what, and then they both decide to sell their parents' house. And while figuring out how to divvy it up, how to clean it out, what to do with the land, they find out that the house is haunted and that their childhoods may have been a lot different if they had actually communicated everything that was going on in their own lives. The book was really, really good. It's a little long. There were a couple moments where I was like, maybe this part didn't have to be in it. But if you really like haunted dolls, I would recommend this book. The next book I want to recommend for the end of fall is Holly Black's The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. This is a bit of an older book, but I reread it kind of recently, and it's actually really well written. It's a very young YA book. It's about this world where vampires exist, but they live in this private little, it's almost like a reservation. There's a big gate around it, and they all live in this place, and humans live there too, but if you go, you can't leave because you may be infected and get everyone else sick with the vampire disease. And this girl goes there because somebody really important to her goes to Cold Town. That's the name of the place where the vampires live. And she meets some really interesting characters and goes on this really interesting journey, and the ending, the plot twist, really got me. I'm not going to do any spoilers in this video today, but it's actually really good. If you were a scene girl or emo when you were in high school and you love Evanescence, this is big Evanescence vibes. The next book I want to recommend is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. Now, this book is also a little controversial because it was her first YA novel. She had two other fiction novels, one of them being Juniper and Thorn, which is right here. I actually read that one really recently, but I actually like To Study in Drowning more. And the reason why is because it felt like a movie to me. It was very movie-esque. It was very visual and emotional, and the story really was compelling. Juniper and Thorn I liked a lot. It had too many honestly similes and metaphors. It pulled me out of the story, and I found myself skipping lines, which I hate to do, but it was too I won't get into the other book. But A Study in Drowning, it's about this girl who really wants to go to school for literature, but no women are allowed in that program, so she goes to the same school for architecture, and she gets invited to fix the architecture of a house of a deceased author she really adores. And this other guy who's from the literature school also gets invited there to go through the author's notes and stuff. There's a fantasy element. There's some fairy stuff. It's pretty spooky. It's not scary like horror, I don't think, but it's definitely spooky as in that feeling you get when you're looking in the dark at a bunch of trees and you see like the shadows between the leaves. It's that kind of like eerie, like nature's coming to get you feeling. The next book I want to recommend is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I have the second book here. I haven't read it yet. It's on my TBR. So I wanted to pick this up because I know it's her adult fiction novel versus the YA Shadow and Bone series. And I really liked it. It's about this girl who gets invited to go to Yale, even though she's not academically very strong, and she has a bit of a dark past because she has this special gift and this fantastical elite group club thing run by old men want to take advantage of her gift. So they invite her to go to the school and many crazy things happen. She's very different from the rest of the girls, but in a way that feels a lot more like culture shocky than like she's special. Like she's very culture shocked. And the beginning of the book was a bit hard to get through, I'm not gonna lie, because it's definitely a tougher read due to it taking place in Yale. Like honestly, I had the hardest time kind of organizing all the groups and the clubs and the tiers of it all and classes in my head to understand kind of what's going on outside of the plot. Like the world was a little complicated, but once the plot really starts to pick up, it's so good. And I mean, Leigh Bardugo writes incredible characters and incredible dialogue, so really can't go wrong. But it's definitely ooky spooky. It's pretty gory too. The opening chapter, this isn't a spoiler since it's the first chapter, but the opening chapter, they're like dissecting a human and she's like trying not to barf. It's really graphic. Some of the most graphic reading, honestly, even though this book isn't like a gore book, but really good book, really highly recommend. The next book, and probably one of my favorite books I've read this year so far, is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's about this woman whose husband recently died in a really tragic accident, and she's coping with it. She's like a group therapist, so she works with a lot of really troubled people, and there is a death at her niece's school, her college. So she goes to that college to take care of her niece and her, like the other kids there, and she holds like some group therapy sessions there. And she finds out that there's this club of women called the Maidens. And it's kind of like a mystery thriller, but because there are so many different sides of confliction that is confusing this main character on her journey to discovering who's killing these girls at this campus, including the niece's friend, it's pretty spooky because you have this guy who's a romantic interest, but he's a little off-putting, and then you have a psychological client of hers who is kind of stalking her, and then you have the creepy teacher guy who's handsome but like in a way that's like, you definitely get away with a lot, and I'm gonna stay away from you type of way. So there's a lot going on, and she's dealing with the grief of losing her husband. But the ending, oh my god, the ending is so good. Really highly recommend that one. It's eerie, but it's also a thriller. There's no like horror gore in it. There's no ghosts or ghouls, but it really spooked me for sure. I was listening to the audiobook while on the train, and I remember just sitting there like looking at all these people like, please, nobody kill me. The next book I want to recommend is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. I really liked this book. It's a YA novel, so it's definitely for younger readers. It's not the type of plot that like goose gaggle and gags you, like you're not gonna gasp out loud or laugh or cry, but I was really taken by the imagery and the plot and kind of like the fairy tale-esque storytelling. It's about this girl whose parents are gravediggers, and she lives on the outskirts of this kingdom. It's a little bit like medieval-y. She wears dresses, you know, and nobody has electricity. She believes in something that like a lot of people don't believe, which is that some dead people come back to, I'm not gonna say to life, they're almost like zombies, and she calls them bone houses, and she knows how to take care of them, how to get rid of them, but it's difficult. Her father had taught her, and then he died, and she finds out that the town that she lives in, the little village that she lives in, is in huge debt, and the sort of mayor, I guess, he kind of like runs the town to pay off their debt to the kingdom. He sells the iron that makes the fence that protects the village from the bone houses, because she believes that bone houses cannot touch iron, so that fence was protecting them from the most part. And they start flooding into the village. So she and this other guy who appears in this very cute romance in the story, I'm not gonna lie to you, they go on a quest to find out how the bone houses exist, where they come from, what's causing them to flood into their village and hurt people. Pretty spooky. It's not very gory if you're a little spooked by that. The bone houses are almost like fantastical in that they're not like covered in flesh and stuff. They're just like these beings that come back to life. The next book I want to recommend is Welcome to the Dark House by, how do you say her name? Lori Faria Stolars. I hope I said that right. This book is amazing if you're looking for a mindless horror story. Mindless. If you want to just put on The Exorcism from the 80s and laugh a little bit. It is a typical story of this gaggle of teens who get invited to this competition and have to survive a haunted house. And it ends up being an amusement park, and they're all like really quirky and different, and it's pretty predictable who ends up living, but it was pretty scary, especially the last like fourth of it. I read it a long time ago. It's been a really long time, to be honest with you. But if you're looking for just a simple, I'm gonna sit down with this and, you know, take my brain out of my head and put it on the table and just mindlessly enjoy some spooky stuff, I would recommend this book. The next book I want to recommend is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is an author that's always intimidated me because I know everybody loves him and he writes really incredible stuff, but I'm so scared that I won't like him. I always get like that with like really high-end authors, but Ocean at the End of the Lane is a super quick read, both short and quick to read because it's from the perspective of a child. So it's very quick. It's not like high intellect. But the ending is spooky. If you like the Tim Burton movies, like Coraline, which obviously was written by Neil Gaiman, or The Corpse Bride, it has that energy, kind of like this ethereal, gothic spookiness, like adult figures never know what's going on and younger figures always end up getting short end of the stick when it comes to the scary parts. The end really, really scared me. It's about this kid who meets this girl, and they're both like super young, and they find this ocean in the forest and they think it's magic. And the kid boy has this babysitter who is pretty eerie and ends up being exactly what he thinks she is, exactly what the parents don't think she is. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm sure most people have read it at this point. It's a classic, but it spooked me. And I read it like not during spooky time, expecting just for like a cute little story, and I don't know why I expected that because it's Neil Gaiman. The last book I want to recommend to wrap up this spooky fall recommendations video is Anatomy by Dana Schwartz. This book, I really like it. It's a love story, and I'm actually in the middle of the sequel, Immortality, but it's about this girl. It takes place in like the end of medieval Scotland, I'll say, because you know, they're wearing like chemise and dresses and stuff. Electricity is kind of becoming a thing, and you know what I mean. It's about this woman who really wants to be a surgeon, and obviously women cannot be doctors. So she dresses up as her recently passed brother and goes to surgeon school. And she gets found out, so she cannot perform surgery on the dead bodies that the surgery school performs surgery on, and like learns and practices cadavers, right? She discovers that there exists grave robbers, which are men who dig up bodies for people for whatever reason. So she pays this guy to dig up graves for her, and you know, some magic happens between the two of them. But she's very intellectual. She looks at gore and these dead bodies like scientific problems that she has to solve. And then this grave robber is like this poor guy who lives in an attic of a theater and is like, dang, cut up that body. But it's really cute. The romance is beautiful. And the sort of like feminist themes of like a woman achieving something that women are not believed to be able to achieve is really exciting. So that wraps up all of my spooky book recommendations. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to comment down below if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are, if you have any other recommendations. I just wanted to wrap up fall with some really good stuff for everybody to be able to read. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.